You know, for months now, perhaps even years, you've been standing at the edge of a significant predicament, utterly paralyzed by the belief that you required an immaculate, unblemished inception. You kept looking for that elusive point in time when the surrounding would finally be impeccable in its curation, your thoughts sublimely aligned, and your courage at its absolute peak. You also quite conveniently kept telling yourself that you were merely preparing. But truth be told, you were not completely honest with yourself. At a somewhat distant but visible corner of your mind, you knew that this was always a psychological trap, a complex but efficient cerebral contraption you so cunningly designed to keep you safe, hidden, and comfortably stagnant. And by doing so, you validated all the unfounded biases you had so unnecessarily but painstakingly constructed. You frequently observed the calendar with a strange kind of reverence, as if a Monday or the first day of a new month harbored some mystical transformative energy that a random Tuesday afternoon didn't. You similarly idealized the requisite internal climate, waiting for a specific atmospheric pressure in your soul, or a preternaturally quiet space to manifest before you would grant yourself permission to act. For example, do you remember when you kept stalling on a new healthful habit because your mood wasn't quite up to it, or perhaps owing to the fear that it would disrupt the fragile equilibrium of your daily routine? You even found yourself deferring that long overdue change until a milestone birthday or the dawn of January 1st, as if a mere page on the wall possessed some inherent authority over your will. You even delayed ambitious projects under the guise that your setup wasn't quite right, or because you lacked some trivial tool you deemed non-negotiable. And as a consequence of these manufactured thresholds, you strongly anchored your prowess to such arbitrary, numerical, and conditional shifts, effectively stripping yourself of your immediate agency, allowing your latent capacity to simply wither away. In reality, though, all you've been doing, whether you liked it or not, was waiting for a ghost, a spectral projection of your own hesitation, if you will. And in the process, you conceived a waiting room with a gravitational pull so intense that it gave birth to your very own singularity. You believed that ready was a destination, failing to realize that it was actually a moving target. You waited for your fearfulness to diminish, yet you only set yourself up to wait forever. You permitted a cloud of worrisomeness to settle over your ambitions, dwelling so heavily on the how that the why simply vanished. Well, as it turned out, your delays were also your denials, and this behavior was nothing more than a sophisticated form of laziness disguised as administrative diligence. However, keeping all that in mind, think back to where you were exactly 5 years ago. No doubt, it is a vast duration you particularly treated as a mere blur of survival. Yes, you did move through seasons of intense activity, but you were also followed by long subterranean stretches of silence, those quiet years when you simmered in the dark, waiting for a catalyst that never arrived. You compulsively looked at your own progress and felt a profound sense of stagnation, assuming that because there was no visible output, there was no inner advancement. But you must recognize that your most remarkable re-engineering happened when no one was watching. You have endured a metamorphosis never meant for public consumption, a surreptitious strengthening of your foundation to bear the weight of the person you are becoming. This period required a quiet, unwavering optimism, the deep-seated belief that work done in the shadows would eventually hold the light. You may have felt being off the grid, but hey, dormancy isn't the same as death. Fortunately, through a dedicated practice of mindfulness, you have been observing shifts in your mental landscape, learning to stay in the moment even when the results are invisible. You have been incubating a version of yourself that is finally ready to move past the safety of the private monologue and into the vulnerability of outward presence. The question now is not whether you have changed, but whether you are willing to let that change be seen. You have spent years refining the theater of your mind, meticulously planning a future you were too hesitant to inhabit, and thus you have now reached a landmark, 5 years on your subjective timeline. You have come a long way, yet you likely feel as though you have only scratched the surface of your fathomless depth. You treated your unrealized potency as a disembodied concept, something existing in the later rather than a visceral reality requiring you to appear exactly as you are. This is the juncture when you must decide whether to continue hiding behind the veil of preparation or to finally step into the light and embrace the unfolding story of your own becoming. Never forget that the version of you who wakes up on a landmark date is the identical version of you who went to sleep the night before. The only distinction is the willingness to stop waiting for a cosmic permission slip and to simply advance. Change doesn't require a sparkling new year or a sterile reset. It is a seductive lie. True transformation doesn't need a gleaming stage. It does, however, require the tenacity to show up even if you're all muddled and reluctant. The thing is, you are likely waiting for a sign, and why even hoping to be handed a map, one whose very terrain is governed by a foundational set of tenets that finally felt complete. You've spent an exhausting amount of energy convincing yourself that you are not quite synchronized enough, that the lighting isn't perfect, or your ideas haven't reached their final form. But this requirement for absolute certainty is actually just a high-level mask for plain old hesitation. It most certainly is. You use words like readiness or timing as shiny shields to keep yourself from the raw act of initiation. You tether your current natural faculty to a future version of yourself, one magically more courageous, more possessed of discipline, and more prepared than the person residing here right now. Bear in mind that as you proceed, this journey will not, for lack of a better term, be easy. The path before you will not be a frictionless glide through some sanitized panorama. It will demand a level of commitment that is often abrasive, a gritty resolve that must persist long after the adrenaline of the dawn has dissipated. You will encounter personal conflicts, the heavy dragging weight of your own cognitive inertia, and the discomfort of stretching into a shape you have not yet earned. It is a tax on your spirit for which you must pay in the currency of consistency. Admittedly, you've had many flaws in the past, and quite frankly, who hasn't? But you have learned from them, corrected yourself, and evolved. You are a fundamentally different person now. It is time to move on, to finally step out of the familiar sanctuary of your own regret and stop apologizing for the ground you occupy. There will also be external resistance, to say the least, Certain individuals will inevitably judge you based on your past version and the very mistakes you've already outgrown, as if you were a static image frozen in their own limited memories. Moreover, some possess minds helplessly trapped in shallowness. They cannot accept that your convictions do not resonate with theirs, and they frivolously consider your expansion as a direct indictment of their refusal to, well, grow up. And so, they will mock and ridicule you simply because they feel that they can, and why even should. In turn, you may feel a flash of angriness rise in response to their narrow perceptions, but you must learn to channel that energy into your own fortitude rather than feed it into their negativity. Remember, you are not here to please everyone. You are here to honor a vision that only you can fully own, a trajectory that demands the shedding of public approval to gain authentic intrinsic velocity. That said, conversely, you will find allies who welcome you with open arms. By adopting the necessary modes of functioning and demonstrating a comforting etiquette in how you present your truth, you create a bridge for seekers who are ready to follow. In fact, you must commit to this transformation for them. More importantly, you must sustain this evolution for that singular soul who never needed the polished version of you to see the value beneath the surface, that one individual who held up the light when your own had almost flickered out. You owe the radical honesty of your genesis to the one who was there before the frame was even built. Listen, you have traveled, quite literally and metaphorically, a staggering amount of distance over this half-decade odyssey, and even after all this, you may still not feel ready. But you know what? That's okay, and you don't need to feel ready. You are already here, and that in and of itself makes an impactful difference. There is an immense power in the simplicity of that single radical act, existing without excuses. See, the perfect beginning was never the goal. It never should have been. The goal was always the unbroken gaze, the willingness to look your life in the eye and realize that you are no longer a disembodied concept. And to embrace that gaze is to speak with the utmost earnestness that you are finally stepping out of the shadows and out of the waiting room. No more hiding, no more delays. You are a visceral reality. You are present, and you are only just beginning.